veniți să învățați alături de noi. Este o sesiune dedicată în mod normal profesorilor. Ei în fiecare marți de la această oră învață. Iar astăzi v-am invitat și pe dumneavoastră, dragi părinți, să fiți și voi profesori, învățăceri. Așa că sunt foarte onorată să-l avem aici pe Kevin Barttlet. Îl cunosc de 8 ani, 8 years now, Kevin. I learned a lot from Kevin, and I'm honored that he's our mentor, and we have the chance to learn directly from him about what we're learning. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Diana. It's good to be back. I've been here a lot. This is one of my second homes around the world. Some things change, and some things stay the same. David Willows is seated alone, so you know, some things don't change. David and I go back a long way. This is going to be right up your street, David. I'm going to ask about what it takes to be a great parent. I know you've studied that. So good to be here. It's hot in Romania, isn't it? I wore the same clothes I was planning to wear anyway, so it doesn't make any difference to me. So what's worth learning? How much did you tell of the David Perkins story? Did you just mention his name? Oh, okay, good. So, all right, so this is my David Perkins story. When David and I worked together in Brussels, I was working on what became the Common Ground Collaborative, which is now a global kind of movement. And we launched it, and we invited one of my favorite writers and speakers, David Perkins, to come. And it was from him I first heard the term What's Worth Learning. In the conference, I gave a workshop called What's Worth Learning, and I used a video of David Perkins talking about what's worth learning, and he came to the workshop. So there I am, giving a workshop about David Perkins, with David Perkins watching the video in my workshop. It's a bit like that Woody Allen moment in, is it Annie Hall, when he pulls Marshall McLuhan out from behind a pillar to justify his belief system. Just to continue this totally pointless story about David Perkins, I asked him at the end, because I was a bit embarrassed about showing his video. I said, you made that a while ago, how did you feel listening to your theories now? And he thought for a while and he said, I looked a lot younger then. And that was his only contribution to the whole philosophical debate. Because people are people and he was concerned about what he looked like. So, maybe that's one thing we all have in common. Maybe we're all vain, I don't know. Another thing we have all in common is most of us like food. So, I'm just going to continue with this irrelevant beginning, just to get everybody in the mood. So I just had an amazing lunch, thank you to the chef at Avenor College. It was a traditional soup with meatballs, followed by risotto with mushroom. Anybody else have that today? Very good. What I want you to think about is this. What's the best meal you've ever had? That could be because it was the first meal you ever had with the person who was going to be the love of your life. Or the last meal you had with your granddad, or the first meal you had in a new city, or just the best food you ever had. So have a think about the best meal you ever had, and then I'm going to ask you to please stand up. To please stand up. Thank you. If you're not going to cooperate, I'm going home. Alright, so we're going to do this. I'm going to play music from a concert. I like to play this music because part of my street cred is I was at this concert. It was in the mid-1970s, because as you notice, I'm very old. So this was Bob Marley at the Rainbow Theatre in London when I was living in London. And here's how it works. I'm going to play some music. When the music's playing, please move freely around the room. You could dance. If you're British, you could walk. If you're old and British, you could stand and walk on the spot. Other normal people can move around the room. When the music stops, please pair up with someone and just share the story of the best meal you ever had. So I'll play the music, you move, I stop the music, pair up with someone different each time. What's the best meal you ever had and why? So here we go, let's see if we can do this. So that's an activity I use with kids a lot. I work all over the world in 20 different countries. But my wife and I always base ourselves in a school. So I'm based in Academia Interamericana de Panama, in Panama City, Panama. It's not an international school, it's a big, bilingual, Catholic, independent school. And I spent a lot of last week teaching 8th grade. I'm having the best of times at my time of life teaching. When I'm with the teachers tomorrow, I'm going to bore you with lots of my 8th grade stories, because kids are so amazing. So food is one thing we have in common, and a lot of what we'll talk about in the next 40 minutes or so is what we have in common. Because a lot of the work I do is based on what it means to be human. We're called the Common Ground Collaborative because we're exploring what we believe to be the common ground of humanity, the things that are worth learning because they're what makes us human. So at a very fundamental level, what's worth learning to me is, what's worth learning is what makes us human. We're all born somewhat human. Scientifically, we're all members of the same species, but so in a sense you could say, well, becoming human is no big deal, is it? But what I really mean is becoming fully human, reaching all of our human capacities. And I guess I also mean becoming humane, because look around, not too far from where we're sitting right now, there's tremendous inhumanity in the world at the moment. I guess there always is, but right now it really seems to be right in our faces. So the work that I'm doing with schools like Avenor is to find a better way of becoming human. And part of that is becoming an expert, I think, for the people who have kids. Who has kids in the school? Your own kids? All right. No, I just bring a few in from the street every day. You know, I'm very popular in the neighborhood. Okay, so your own kids. Now I've distracted myself. So if you could just stop laughing, it would help. All right, thank you. Just carry on, I'll just ignore you. All right, so we're in the learning game. I just had an interesting interview with Kinderpedia, and we talked about the learning game, the learning business. So for me, one thing that's worth learning is learning how to learn. And that's an easy thing to say. Yeah, well, kids need to learn how to learn because there's so much content in the world that you can't learn all the content, but if you learn how to learn, then all learning is available to you. And I believe that. I also believe that our business is full of empty cliches and things that people say and never do a damn thing about. So within my work, we decided we would very intentionally build learning experts. So we looked at what experts do, and here's what we found. And none of this will surprise you, because I think every idea I've ever had, you've probably also had. It was this: experts are experts in the ideas of their field and how they relate to each other. If you ask a physics teacher, what are the ideas that make physics physics? Are there any physics teachers here? Yes. What makes physics physics? What are some of the concepts? This is really well planned. You can tell we rehearsed this. No, you go. No, you go. No, you go. No, you go. What makes up? Give me one of the key concepts in physics. I'm glad I did this. Sorry? Relativity. Okay. Ask a physicist and you'll get relativity. You get energy, forces, workload, waves, that kind of thing. Ask an architect, you'll get, if they're an expert architect, and I guess we all want to work with expert architects, because I could be an architect if you didn't need an expert. So experts are experts in the ideas of the field and how they relate to each other. So we packed our curriculum model with conceptual learning. And we made it simple because all of our conceptual standards begin with the words, learners understand that. And then we said experts, don't worry, it's not going to be 40 minutes of curriculum. Then we said experts are also highly skilled in what they do. So we need to build their levels of competency so that learners are able to. And then we said we desperately need expert human beings with empathy and perspective and self-knowledge and care and curiosity. All those character traits that make the most human of us human. So we basically said we're going to try to keep everything simple and use a learning language that any student can use, any teacher can use, any staff member can use, any parent can use. And I want to try it out with you guys. So, learning to become a learning expert to me is becoming good with ideas, so conceptual learning, good with skills, and good people, so conceptual competency, character. So we're going to try it out. Those three kinds of learning always working together. I thought we were going to have students. I was going to ask them to do that. But I know we've got teachers and other staff members. So you have individual pieces of paper and pens on your table. I'm being a bad teacher. Let's wait till I've also spoken to the parents. I'm going to ask you to think about this. Using our very simple sentence stems, all the teachers here know these, I hope, some of the staff may. As an expert teacher, I understand that, and I am able to, and I'm becoming more. Anybody like to volunteer an example? As an expert teacher, I understand that. Pick on anyone in particular, I understand that. Yes?
Different needs. Understand the students have different needs.
Thank you. As an expert teacher, I understand that my students have different needs. One of the things that is bothering me in my work with students at the moment is I just did an amazing, I thought it was amazing, activity with the kids where they wrote a history of their own future. I said, imagine yourself, here's today's date 10 years from now. Write a history of your own future, and then they wrote a geography of their future, they mapped towards their future. Some of the work was so brilliant, and some was less brilliant. But in schools where kids are sitting in rows learning the same thing all the time, I'm now thinking, particularly Fabiola, a particular young lady, and I'm thinking, I wonder how bored she is for most of the time. Because her thinking is just infinite, through the roof. And yet we're often giving kids all the same stuff all the time. So as an expert teacher, I understand that all my kids learn differently. Every one of them has different needs. Thank you. Being a student these days is hard. Being a teacher is hard. I think it's harder than ever. Being a parent is as close to impossible as I could get. I have 5 kids, and David and I worked together in Brussels. Running a big school was way easier than having a family of 5 kids. So the parent job is very, very difficult. And we get no training in it that I know of. You know, we just get plunged in. We all go through life thinking, I have no idea how to do this. And we plunge into it and then we think, I think that went okay. I mean, they've all left home, so maybe it didn't. So let's have a brave parent. As an expert parent, I understand that. Somebody finished that tricky sentence. As an expert, thank you, Christine. As an expert parent, I understand that. Young man here in the orange polo shirt.
I understand that my kid is different than me. I'm able to see the differences, and I'm becoming more aware that his life is, of course, different than mine.
Okay. What's your name?
Gabriel.
Gabriel. Were you going to say Gabby?
Gabriel.
Okay. Okay. That was modeling the whole sequence I'm going to ask everybody to do. No, it was perfect. It was perfect. Get it. As an expert parent, I understand that all my kids are different from each other. I understand that I have to treat them differently, for example. I understand their life will not be the same as mine. I'm becoming more aware of that. So what I'd like you to do, just to see how manageable it is parents do what Gabby modeled. So as expert parents, we understand that. As expert parents, we are able to. As expert parents, we're becoming more. I'm going to go back to the teacher one because it's all on the same slide. So please discuss this with other parents. Have a chat. But what I'd like to do is everybody ends up with a piece of paper, and on it says, as an expert parent, I understand that, I'm able to, I'm becoming more. Teachers, staff members, employees, as a person in the learning profession, I understand that, I'm able to, I'm becoming more. We're going to share this eventually, but try and come up with 3 statements, 1 conceptual, 1 competency, 1 character. Any questions about the activity? Are we good? We're good. So let's get moving again, because I don't want anyone to fall asleep. So could you please stand up again and bring your paper with you? And this time we just form trios. Try to form a trio with people you don't know, don't work with. Parents, if you mix with teachers. And just share your understand that, able to become more. So in trios, just share what you wrote. Just share what you wrote. Have a conversation about it. So what's worth learning? One part of the answer to me is, it's worth learning how to learn, because you stay with that for the rest of your life. A simple answer to what's worth learning for me is, and this is something I only realized in the last few years, and I've been doing this kind of work for 50 years, it's worth learning what the kids will take away with them. Because in theory, really, if they don't, it wasn't worth learning. Now, it may have got them through a test. That's a whole other conversation I'll have with the whole faculty when we do on a day on assessment. I think it's on Monday. But I care far more about what we call transfer, because I think almost inarguably what's worth learning is what kids will take away from an Avenor education that they will use for the rest of their lives. One thing they may use is a definition of the learning process. Every time I enter a situation, I do a lot of, say, board meetings, workshops, I think, they don't really have an idea about what it means to be a board member. It's a conceptual issue. Or, no, they've got a pretty good grasp of the idea of being a board member, they just don't know what to do. It's a competency issue. I might occasionally think, and there's a couple of people who probably shouldn't be on this board, it's a character issue, but that's another story. So all the time I'm thinking, really by the time people leave here, they need to understand that, be able to become more. That 3 C's, it sounds simplistic. I think it's just simple. Kids can use it. When I have so many stories about kids, but instead of just asking your children what they learned, ask them to finish the sentence. We've been learning about heat waves in Bucharest. Finish the sentence for me. When it comes to the climate, I now understand that. It's a different kind of dinner table conversation from what did you do in school today, to which the answer universally is always, oh, I've had less than that. I usually get nothing. What did you do in school today? Nothing. It doesn't matter what language. What did you do in school? Nada. Always the same, all over the world. So we need a common conversation, a common language to talk about learning. Because schools are cultures, and cultures share a language. So if a school's a learning culture, it is a learning language. We now have one. We can talk about, I understand that, I'm able to, and become. It's not the only thing worth learning, but I'd be pretty happy if I'm Diana or Daniela or any faculty member, if every kid left Avenor good with ideas, good with skills, and good people. Probably in reverse order. Good people first. My 5 kids, I care if they get a job, lose a job, etc. But the only thing that would really upset me is if they ever did anything unethical. Then I would think I'd screwed up as a parent. It wouldn't maybe be my responsibility, but so maybe in reverse order. Good people, good with ideas, good with skills. So I think that's worth learning. Here's another thing that's worth learning, and I just want to get opinions and then show you what we have in mind here. Here's a question for a parent. In fact, any of you can answer this wearing a parent hat or a teacher staff member hat. I'm going to give you a couple of options again. I asked my daughter, who I work with, who makes all these slides, to make me a slide that said, your transportable gifts, because I was asking parents, what did you never get in school that you'd love to give your kids? Because I think all of us as parents kind of want our kids to have something better than we had. So she sent me back this slide. This is another tangential story. And she said, there you go. And it had these green things on them. Do you know what they are?
Algae. I think they are algae.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're algae. They're kind of moss balls. They're called marimo. In Japan, certain families keep these in a jar of liquid. They grow. They live for about 200 years. And they pass them on to the next generation. So I thought, what a nice metaphor for what we as parents pass on to the next generation when we give them an education at Avenor. So, for your future information, those are Japanese moss balls, they're algae, they're called marimo. So, as parents, your intergenerational gifts. So be thinking about one thing you'd like your kids to walk away with from Avenor that you never got when you were a kid. So what would you like to give your child? Students, I normally was asking them, what would you fight to learn? Give me one thing that if you could only learn one thing at Avenor, what would it be? If I get a chance to, I'll meet some students and I'll ask them that. For people who work here, if Diana said, here's the bad news, we can only keep you for 6 more weeks, and you can teach one thing. If you could only teach your students one thing, what would you fight to teach? And I don't mean the skill set like learning how to read. I mean a big piece of content. And I'm going to ask you to give it in the form of a question. Because a lot of the work I do is driven by inquiry. So we begin our learning modules with questions like, how does money work? What is anti-racism? Why don't satellites fall out of the sky? So if you work in the learning profession, if you could only explore one big question with your students, and that's it, what would you choose? So you can be a parent and read and write what you'd like to give your kids. Or you can be a professional and write a question that you'd like to explore with your kids, if you could only explore one. So I'm going to ask you to write your gift to your kids or your question for your students on one of these for a particular reason. So you can choose one thing you want to give to your kids or one question you'd like to inquire into with your students But please write it on one of these strips in a big fat pen. Thank you, Nikki. So please write your gift to your kids or your question on a strip. And you only get one, so make it a good gift or a good question. As a human being and a teacher, if your kids could only explore one big idea, one big question, what would your question be? Forces the issue if you only get one choice. What would your... What could Shakespeare teach us about human nature? How can you deal with change? Jet lag, I had about 2 hours sleep last night. I know it doesn't show. I'm just so perky. I woke up at about 1 a.m. and I thought, it's Avenor. We could have coloured strips and we could use them to construct the Avenor logo. So then I'm just about to say, so my point of reference in my guardian angel is Danielle, and I say, do you think you could get about 150 coloured strips? And right up until 5 minutes before this workshop, the team was working on them. So what I'd like you to do is gather around any of these beautifully prepared boards, and we're going to post our work in, oh, where's my slide? In Avenor type logos. So one of the other people, I can't see, I don't remember who put all the pins out. So there are pins on the boards. So instead of doing them horizontally, please find a group with enough strips and let's cover these boards with Avenor logos, these starbursts of bright colour. So use the pins. You may have to make artificial ones, but we're going to finish in about 5 minutes, but just see if you can just have a walk around and see what other people write. Just have a quick gallery walk. Have a look around and see what people write. So, just to wrap up, I think it's worth learning how to learn, but you can only do that collectively if we define the learning process in a simple enough language for everyone to become fluent and confident in that language. And as I'll be working with the teachers for the rest of the week, if we have a pedagogy that builds ideas, and a pedagogy that builds competency, and a pedagogy that builds character. So that's what parental info, that's what we'll be working on for the next few days. It's worth learning what teachers think is worth learning. If you say to a teacher, you can only teach one thing, what's it going to be? We're not in this profession to get rich, let's face it. We're in this profession because we like kids. And we want to give them the best. So if you ask teachers what's worth learning, we should pay attention. We're a community, so it's worth asking parents what matters to parents. What would you like to give them? If you could only give your kids one thing from this education, what would it be? So I don't know if we can... I think the visuals work, so thank you for the people who helped to make the idea of turning the logo into a spray of ideas. If we can somehow record them, that would be nice. That's work for somebody. Not me. So it's worth learning what parents think is worth learning. It's worth learning what teachers think is worth learning. And for me, it's worth learning what makes us human. So here's a final thought. What we're working on around the world, and in Avenor in particular, this I should say to any teachers working on this is not a finished version. But Avenor's done a lot of work on this idea of the end in mind, that Avenorians will be future ready. And we're working on the synthesis now because we converged on this idea pretty much at the same time. We have different descriptors. I'm just using a model. So it's worth learning how to be future ready. That bit, I think, is going to stay. That's fixed. That's a big idea. Avenorians are future ready. In the middle, good with ideas, good with skills, good people. And through 14 years, how old are the kids when you get them? Are they 2? Are they 2 years old? So we have parents, we have your kids for a long time. Day after day, year after year, embedded in ideas that matter. We're thinking it's worth learning to become a balanced person. Don't worry about the precise language, but the ideas will stay the same. Because as human beings, we all want to believe we're part of something bigger than ourselves and find well-being, physical, social, occupational well-being. Become balanced and purposeful people. We live in a world of groups. Group membership identifies us. Look at American politics right now, or UK politics. People find their identity in groups, and groups are increasingly divided with less and less common ground. And by the way, if you ever study the social media are contributors to that divide. That's another conversation. We need to teach kids how to work with different kinds of people in different kinds of groups and different kinds of purposes, and not simply mistrust someone because they don't look like us or sound like us, etc. We need to know how to solve the world's problems. We need to know the difference between causation and correlation. We need to be good thinkers who can see the principles of the way the universe works and become rational problem solvers. We need to contribute to broken social systems and broken natural ecosystems, because the way we're treating the planet right now, I just had a chat to Olivia about the fact that we're basically burning up. We need students who will take responsibility for reversing the mess that we put them in. We're all incredibly creative. One of the parents talked about teaching kids entrepreneurship, how to create new ideas, new tools, and also new works of art. I'm a big lover of the arts, and new painting and new sculpture. We're the innovative species. We create things. And we're the talking species. We have language. So we need to teach kids how to stand up in public, make a compelling argument for a matter of principle or a big idea. Because we're the storytelling species. We send signals to each other in different languages, through different media, for different purposes. So, just to wrap this up, we think at Avenor, it's worth learning how to be future ready, how to be a balanced person, a good relationship builder, a good problem solver, a contributor to sustainability, an innovative creator, and a compelling communicator. So that's a kind of summary of what we're working on to say. That's what it means to be a whole human being. A lot of people talk about holistic education. I don't think we can do anything unless we define it. So this is an attempt at, what does a whole human being look like? So, it's worth listening to teachers, it's worth listening to parents, it's worth learning how to learn. It's worth building everybody's human capacity to be the best human being that they can be. So that's the work of Avenor, and that's the work of the Common Ground. We're partnering in this work. So, in In about an hour, that's an exploration of what's worth learning. So I hope you enjoyed it, I hope it was useful and interesting. And those people who need to leave, now is the time to leave. Some people might want to stay for Q&A, but I just want to thank you for all being here on a hot afternoon at the end of the day's work. It's been great working with you. I look forward to seeing the teachers in the morning. And otherwise, if you're leaving, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
I feel overwhelmed really to present Kevin. He's one of the big names in education. And I was lucky across my professional life to meet a few. When you look in the world of education, you see big names talking about one bit of education. You see a big name talking about differentiation, someone else about assessment for learning. So they are very specialized in different parts of learning, different aspects of learning. But really, Kevin had the ability and the vision to see learning as a whole. He moved from learning looked at in silos to learning as an ecosystem. With Kevin, as you saw in the past hour, learning is a story. And it is the language of learning and the story that we want to learn from Kevin in these days with us. It's a language of learning that we hope that parents will start using as well when children come home and use it. We are committed to this journey together. Kevin visited Avenor in 2016 for the first time and started to work with the community. They were meeting with parents, then we set up our learning principles. Then the pandemic came, some, as we know, not very productive years for education, and now we start again this work. Kevin worked as the headmaster in many schools around the world, and if you look at his educational journey, it's stability in everything he does. He was for 14 years head of the International School of Brussels, one of the top schools in the world. In this time, the school was named as the School of Future, a very important award. And Kevin was the superintendent of the year in international education in the times. Before that, he was for periods between 7 and 11 years in Namibia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Vienna, and somewhere else. Do you remember? It's one more.
I don't remember Malaysia or Vietnam, to be honest. Where was I? Tanzania, Namibia, Brussels, and Vienna. And before that, top schools in inner city London.
The next frontier inclusion worked in Vietnam, what I know.
Ah, yeah. We founded it together in Brussels.
Yes, but okay.
It's based in Malaysia.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so I did my work. Right, so this is Kevin, and probably I shouldn't have added all these words. No need to convince you after the 1 hour that he spent with us. We are lucky to have Kevin with us until next week, Thursday. So he will have weekly, daily workshops with teachers, including Monday. So we make this commitment. We know that Monday is a public holiday, but we are going to come to school for a whole day.
Sorry.
And it's worth. Actually, we asked teachers, and everyone signed for the workshop because they see value, and we all see. So the outcome of this series of workshops, and it's a work that we resumed after the pandemic, and we're going to start now full speed. It's a work of redefining what we do and looking and learning to the same language and through the three lenses that Kevin presented to us. So that's us and that's our work from now. Now I think that it's time for you to ask Kevin questions, including about this shoes. Look at his shoes. I know he's proud of them.
I'm very proud of my shoes and my socks, to be honest. This is British contribution to culture, Dr. Martens and the Rolling Stones. So that's got that over with.
Hello, my name is Raluca. I'm a mother of 2 kids. One is 16, one is 13. And I was wondering, how do you see the role of a parent in this learning process? Because we are, coming from a different culture of learning. So for us, the Romanian parents, the proof for learning are the marks. And how do you see us, like controlling the marks, not controlling the homework, not,
Sure.
where is the parent role?
Parent role is a complicated one because people are complicated and kids are complicated and education is changing. I think one of the driving forces of the quality of education is assessment. So things we associate with grades and marks and testing. But the problem is, some of the things that are on that screen are very valuable, I think, and I suspect most of us agree, but they're not particularly amenable to quantifiable tests. Can you really give a kid 90% on a sit-down test for being a contributing citizen, for example? So I worked with actually a big name, but really a big name in education called, his name is Jay McTighe, and educators may know his work. We spent the last 2 years working on what we call a balanced assessment system, based on 5 different principles. I won't bore you with all the details, but I'll share one of them with you. We called it the purpose principle. And for Jay and myself, the primary purpose of assessment is feedback. Because we know feedback is one of the most important things to improve anybody's performance. Feedback to learners to improve their learning, but also when we look at our assessment data, feedback to us as professionals to inform our practice. So I think I'm rambling around to answering your question, I hope. So grades and marks may serve some purposes in terms of the easily quantified results of a kid in some subjects. But I would say they need to be balanced with other forms of evidence gathering that involve the kids and the parents. So if I want to show that I've made contributions to society, I don't think a multiple choice test will help. But if I have to provide evidence of my progress, and that's tangible evidence that I can share with my parents, that I can share with teachers, then I think you have a better shot at knowing how your child is really developing. So what we'll talk about in this day on assessment is balancing quantifiable testing with evidence-based performances of understanding. Where you give kids a task to do, a real-world problem-solving task. They work on it together, it has very rigorous criteria, and they have to actually do something to show what they've learned, as opposed to just answer some questions. So, what I'm thinking is, it's much more interesting for me as a parent to see my kid's portfolio of evidence than it is just to see some numbers on a chart. I'm not saying, I don't want to scare anybody, I'm not saying Avenor will do away with grading or testing. But for me, it's only part of the whole picture of what a child is really becoming. So I think what you're likely to see more of, while you won't see grading and testing dissipate, because I think parents rely on that, is much more the gathering of genuine evidence of progress against this portrait. Here's my portfolio to show how I am becoming a rational problem solver. Here's my evidence, here's what I now understand, here's what I've been doing, here's the work I've been doing. It's very like the work of an artist. In the old IB art exhibits, a teacher would come to a school and look at the kids' artwork if they were doing IB higher level art, and wouldn't just look at the product, but would look at their process, look at their learning process. So I think you'll have a much better picture of where your kids stand if we add to marking and grading and the things that parents are familiar with, evidence-based portfolios of genuine achievement against big real-world goals like those. So what I'm trying to do is bring more balance. So we're not just relying on what my colleague calls teach, test, and hope for the best. But here's what we want the kids to be able to do. Here's them proving they can do it. One other thought about that, because it touches on my passion for inclusive education. There's a brilliant assessment guy called Thomas Guskey. He talks about the 3 Ps. He says we should not just look at performance. Performance would be the point arrived at, which is where we tend to focus. They got an A, they got 85%. But we should also look at the second P, which is progress, the distance traveled. And we should look at process factors that had an impact on performance and progress. So I'm very interested in this 3 Ps idea, largely because, and I have an autistic granddaughter and a language delayed grandson. I'm very interested in the progress made by certain children who may be neurodiverse and learn differently. And I don't think it's fair that this kid made more progress than anybody else, but gets an F because their performance isn't the same as the rest of the class. So, multiple forms of assessment for learning, not just of learning. Testing is good for some things. Performance assessments are for other things that look at performance and progress and process. And I guess the final thing I'll say is, for me, parent-teacher conferences, either as a school leader, David, when we worked together, you maybe had the same experience. Parent-teacher conferences were disastrous for me as a parent. You know, I have those weird moments, some of you may have because you may be teachers, some parents. I would think, who organised this? And I thought, oh, it's me, when I was a school director. You know, we would run around the high school trying to find the right classroom, spend 5 garbled minutes with the teacher learning not very much, and then run to the next one. I'd much rather see what we're calling curated conversations with evidence. So a kid is with the teacher and you, and saying, here's my narrative writing from 6 months ago, here's what I was doing, describing it, look at the progress I've made, I'm now here, and the teacher's able to say, that performance is on a par with what we would expect, but she may need a little help with this. So, evidence-based curated conversations with the learner at the center, some testing, but less reliance on numbers and grades and more reliance on real-world, authentic performances of understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm wondering how do you, as a parent, I understand this. How do I evaluate this progress? Only discussion with the kid and the teacher?
Well, it depends on what this school decides. I know some schools that don't do any grading. I know some schools that do lots of traditional grading. I think the school will have to decide with you as parents. Because I think there's a natural need as a parent, because I'm a parent, to say, how's she doing? Is that kind of what I should be expecting of her? Compared to what? And is there anything I can do to support her? To me, those are the questions I ask when I'm a parent going to anything to do with assessment. Is she doing okay? Is that about normal? What else can I do to help her? Is she operating to her optimal capacity? And I think we sometimes drown parents in all kinds of information that obscure the answers to those basic questions. Even for those teachers in the room, and I don't know where the school stands on standardized reporting. I mean, reporting to standards. But I've seen teachers spend many, many hours sending reports to parents against 50 standards. And I'm a parent, I'm thinking, I don't need this. What am I even supposed to do with it? I just want to know, are they doing okay? Can I help? You know, what are their strengths? What are their weaker points? So, all I can say is, working with Avenor, I'm trying to bring simplicity and common sense to that. Because if I get answers to that, one thing I don't really care about, but I may be the only one in the room, I don't care whether she's top of the class. As a parent, I never cared about that. I just want to know, Is she working to her optimal capacity? What are her great strengths? What are the things she could work on? How can I help? I'll add one more thing. I really like to know whether the teacher knows my kid. And I really like to know what kind of feedback my kid is getting. That's why I'm so pro these feedback systems. Because if you can see in a portfolio, not only the kids' work over time, organized in a simple way, but periodic feedback from the teacher, then I can have a conversation with my kid and say, God, Miss So-and-so knows you so well. How are you using that feedback? Do you think she's identified what your strengths and weaknesses are? Okay, what shall we work on? So to me, I'm trying to build communication lines between the three stakeholders, the parent, the teacher, the kid, in ordinary common sense language that provides parents with the information they need. Whether that's in the form of some grades or numbers, fine. I'm more interested in learning through conversations, to be honest.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hi Kevin, thank you very much for everything you shared. I have a question, hoping that you will be able to combine your experience as both educator and parent. And I'm wondering how to spot potential in kids. Would you believe that it's good for us parents to expose the kids to I don't know how many activities in order to find that thing that he might be good at? Or what would be your best approach in spotting the potential of a kid and, let's say, setting him on a good direction?
It's a great question, and so was the last one. Thank you. Here's a personal vision. A portrait of an Avenorian. So we're saying, we would love to nurture kids who kind of look like this. Helping each child find their pathway towards that portrait in both the curricular domain and the co-curricular, extracurricular domain. For example, if I want a kid to be a compelling communicator, one of the best examples of good communication I know would be TED Talks. So one thing my wife did in our last school, and the one before, was bring student TED Talks into the co-curricular program. So if a kid is going to be a language user, storyteller, an author, a writer, and you begin to spot that, then you can steer them towards speech and debate, TED Talks. Make sure that in the classroom, on the curricular side, we always give kids opportunities to share verbally and to listen to each other. A lot of the work I've been doing with 8th grade in Panama the last couple of weeks has been, they were used to sitting in rows, which is not the way I teach like this. Getting them first of all, because I had to get to know them, because I was looking for potential as well. Who plays in a school team? Okay, Carla, what team do you play for? I play volleyball. Tell me one thing that makes teams successful. Communication, etc., etc. So I do a lot of work on, before I do any content, why it's important to work in a team. And then I do a lot of work on respect, because they weren't used to listening to each other. What are we going to do when one person is sharing, the rest of us are listening? Don't forget, and then stop. No, not everybody's listening. So, building those things, because teachers can spot potential. For me, I can spot potential pretty quickly, especially, funnily enough, if we're working in teams, because you move around there and when you notice who's not participating. So, I think it was Roosevelt who said, they don't care what we know as long as they know that we care. So, one thing I always say to teachers, we only need to be good at 3 things. We need to know the kids, we need to know learning theory, and we need to know our content. So I think teachers know the kids. Something we haven't discussed as a school, but I like the idea of kind of advisory, but I call them learning teams. If I have an advisory learning team, and it's about a soccer-sized, football-sized team, 12 kids, 11 kids, all year, I know those kids really well. And if I'm in regular communication with you, you and I will both know. You have sons or daughters? One son. What's his name? Mateus. Mateus. If I'm Mateus' teacher and you're Mateus' mom, I'm pretty sure we notice what his passions are and what his interests are. And then I like the idea of kind of steering kids towards those pathways where they might reach their full potential. You get schools where you have to have a systemic decision as to when you start to specialise. In the UK, where I grew up, you specialised at the age of 16. I chose 3 A-levels. In IB diploma schools, you choose 6 subjects, 3 higher, 3 standard at the age of 16, but it's still a more holistic education. But honestly, I don't think it's that difficult to notice individual kids' potential if we're paying attention to them. And then I think I like the idea of pathways towards a portrait, kids gathering their own evidence, increasingly in charge of their own choices, and then in constant communication between parents and teachers. And then I just don't think it's that difficult. I don't think we could force a future on our kids, but we can certainly nurture their skills. One of the things that disturbs me as an inclusive kind of teacher is, like I was saying, within 2 lessons, in fact within about 10 seconds, I could tell that one of the kids I would be teaching was very special. Because before I even started, she came up to me and said, hello, my name's Fabiola, and I talk a lot, and some of the teachers don't like me because I talk all the time. So I just want you to know before you start teaching me that I talk a lot. So I know from my own family what kind of learner Fabiola is. Turns out, to me, she's almost a genius level learner. But if you have a school where kids are used to self-advocating, are able to talk, are given choices, like this school, I don't think it's difficult, Avenor professionals, to spot the potential in kids. And then we just nurture the hell out of them, basically. But I don't think it's that hard. Who knows the kids best? You know your kids better than we do. But we know them pretty well by the time we've had them for a while. I just think we should always be in contact with each other saying, you know what he did today? I think that shows real potential. What shall we do about it? So, is that too vague an answer? You can't say yes. Yes, it's terrible. I'll never ask another question in my life. But I just think it's almost, just get to know them and then follow your own love for them and common sense. They won't go very far wrong.
Relationships is one of our values at Avenor, and I've seen many schools, but that's one of the best happening here. And in fact, it was an email 2-3 days ago about Mate, one of Mate's strengths, and the teacher giving some advice. That advice came actually from Mate's teacher on how to develop this filter. So we are with you, Kevin. We know how important they are, and we keep building.
Yeah, the brilliant Canadian Michael Fullan, who has written a library's worth of books about leadership and change, pretty much nailed it, I think, in terms of the relationship with parents. When he just said very simply, information without relationships is never knowledge. So if a school is just sending out information but doesn't know the parents are not turning that into knowledge. You know, in the cultures I live in, honestly, if it's longer than a WhatsApp message, they're not reading it anyway. So to me,